At exactly 0347 hours on July 6, 2026, in the fog-draped southern corridor of the Strait of Hormuz, the crew of the Panamanian-flagged bulk carrier HMM Namu heard a sound that no merchant sailor ever wants to hear. The hollow metallic clang of a fast attack craft pulling alongside, followed by the unmistakable whir of a rigid-hull inflatable boat's outboard motor cutting to idle. Then silence. Then the detonation. The shape-charged limpet mine punched a half-meter hole through the starboard hull below the waterline, not large enough to sink the vessel immediately, but large enough to send a message that reverberated from the Persian Gulf to the boardrooms of every shipping company on Earth. The HMM Namu had committed an unforgivable act, at least in the eyes of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. It had attempted to transit the Strait of Hormuz using the southern shipping lane, the internationally recognized route hugging the coast of Oman, rather than the Iran-designated northern corridor that Tehran had begun demanding all commercial traffic use, a corridor that required direct coordination with the IRGC itself. This was not piracy, this was policy. 40 minutes later, a second vessel, the Greek-operated tanker Aegean Carrier, was struck by two IRGC fast boats deploying anti-ship limpet charges in the same southern lane. The vessel's emergency transponder activated instantly, broadcasting its distress on Channel 16 across the entire Gulf maritime network. Within 4 minutes, USS 5th Fleet Headquarters in Manama, Bahrain, had eyes on the situation. The duty officer at Naval Support Activity Bahrain did not need to reach for a manual. The protocols were preloaded and the clock had just started. Let me tell you exactly what happened next, because the next 72 hours would bring the world closer to a regional war than at any point since 2003. And the speed, lethality, and precision of the American military response would fundamentally change the calculus of every adversary watching from Beijing to Moscow. The IRGC did not act alone and did not act impulsively. What looked from the outside like reckless escalation was in fact the opening move of a carefully pre-calculated pressure campaign. Tehran's logic was surgical. The June 17th Memorandum of Understanding had mandated that the U.S. lift its naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and that Iran, in return, guarantee safe passage for all vessels. But the MOU said nothing about which route constituted safe passage. Iranian legal architects had embedded what they believed to be an exploitable ambiguity by demanding that all commercial ships coordinate with IRGC Naval Command and use the Northern Corridor. Tehran was attempting to institutionalize a de facto toll booth on the most critical maritime choke point on Earth. Every tanker that complied was a diplomatic victory. Every tanker that defied them was an opportunity. Do you believe Iran genuinely thought the United States would allow this? Comment your answer below. Simultaneously with the attacks on the two commercial vessels, U.S. Central Command's theater-wide sensor network, the Joint Surveillance Target Attack Radar System aircraft orbiting at 40,000 feet over the Gulf of Oman detected a surge of encrypted IRGC communications traffic originating from Bandar Abbas Naval Headquarters. The signal profile matched pre-identified command and control signatures associated with IRGC Naval Operations Order transmissions. Within 6 minutes, the data was fused into the common operational picture at CENTCOM Forward Headquarters at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. The picture was clear. This was coordinated, this was commanded, and this was not over. At 0614 hours, the USS Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group, operating in the North Arabian Sea with full combat air patrol configuration, received a flash precedence tasking order from 5th Fleet. The message, encrypted under the latest generation of quantum key distribution protocols, contained 3 words that set the entire strike package in motion: Execute Archer Protocol. What followed was not a reaction. It was a pre-planned, rehearsed, and legally pre-authorized kinetic response. A calibrated punishment strike designed to degrade Iran's ability to threaten international commerce through the strait while simultaneously maintaining enough escalatory headroom to avoid triggering a full-scale war. The distinction, as you will see, proved almost impossible to maintain. At 22:19 hours on July 7th, the first wave of strikes began. 85 Iranian targets across 5 provinces were simultaneously engaged. U.S. Air Force B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, which had been forward-staged to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean weeks earlier as a deterrence signal, released GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators against hardened IRGC coastal defense infrastructure in Bandar Abbas and Sirik. At the same time, the Theodore Roosevelt's Air Wing launched a massed strike pack. At 22:19 hours on July 7th, the first wave of strikes began. 85 Iranian targets across 5 provinces were simultaneously engaged. U.S. Air Force B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, which had been forward-staged to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean weeks earlier as a deterrence signal, released GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators against hardened IRGC coastal defense infrastructure in Bandar Abbas and Sirik. At the same time, the Theodore Roosevelt's Air Wing launched a mass strike package of 48 F/A 18E Super Hornets, each carrying AGM-84H Slammer standoff land attack missiles precisely calibrated to strike Iranian air defense radar nodes, including SA-15 Gauntlet and HQ-9 sites that form the integrated air defense umbrella over Iran's coastline. Simultaneously, 40 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles were ripple-fired from Arleigh Burke-class destroyers in the Gulf of Oman, their GPS-aided terrain following navigation systems, threading them through mountain valleys to strike command and control nodes, and over 60 IRGC small boat staging facilities identified as participating in the morning's attacks. CENTCOM's official statement was clinical in its precision. U.S. forces had struck Iranian air defense systems, command and control networks, coastal radar sites, anti-ship missile capabilities, and more than 60 IRGC fast attack craft. The language was deliberate, measured, and left no ambiguity about American intent. The message to Tehran was simple. You attacked commerce, we have destroyed your ability to do it again. Iran's response came faster than Washington expected. At 01:34 hours on July 9th, the alarm systems at Al Azraq Air Base in eastern Jordan detonated in sequence across the entire installation. The base, which serves as a critical logistics hub and hosts a permanent detachment of American forces, had just entered the crosshairs of the IRGC's Aerospace Force. 10 Fateh 110 precision-guided ballistic missiles, each carrying a 500-kilogram warhead, were on terminal approach from launch sites inside western Iran. The flight time from launch to impact at Azraq is approximately 7 minutes. That 7-minute window separates the living from the dead. The Patriot PAC-3 MSE batteries defending Al-Azraq activated instantly. The AN/MPQ-65 radar began tracking the inbound threats within seconds of launch detection by the space-based infrared system satellites that had been watching Iranian missile units for weeks. At intercept altitude, PAC-3 hit-to-kill interceptors screamed upward at Mach 4.1, guided by active radar seekers. The intercept solutions were calculated in milliseconds by the Patriot's fire control computers. 7 of the 10 Iranian missiles were destroyed in the upper atmosphere over the Jordanian desert, their warheads detonating harmlessly in showers of burning metal. 3 broke through. The warheads struck the southeastern perimeter of the airbase, destroying 2 maintenance hangars, damaging the taxiway, and triggering secondary explosions in a fuel storage compound. Casualties were confirmed. The specifics remain classified, but the message from Tehran was impossible to misread. We can reach your soldiers in Jordan, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, and we are willing to cross that line. Within 90 seconds of first impact at Azraq, the IRGC simultaneously launched a separate missile barrage targeting U.S. military assets at Ali Al Salem Air Base in Kuwait and the naval support activity in Manama, Bahrain. Air defense networks at both locations engaged successfully, with all inbound missiles intercepted before reaching their targets. But the psychological effect was seismic. For the first time since the initial phase of the conflict began, Iran had fired ballistic missiles directly at American military personnel across 3 countries in a single coordinated salvo. At the NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey, President Trump was pulled from a bilateral meeting. Aides described the scene as tense but controlled. The president, briefed on the Azraq strikes, authorized the second wave before the first missile fragments had cooled in the Jordanian sand. At 0312 hours, 90 additional Iranian targets across the southern provinces were struck. This wave went deeper. F-35A Lightning II aircraft from the 34th Fighter Squadron operating out of Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, flying under full low observable configuration, penetrated Iranian airspace at altitudes below Iranian radar coverage horizons to strike hardened IRGC Aerospace Force launch facilities in Kogaluya and Boyar Ahmad province. The targeting intelligence fused from NSA signals collection, NRO satellite imagery, and human intelligence networks that had been patiently curated for months allowed strike planners to aim directly at the specific battery complexes that had fired the Fateh 110 missiles at Azraq. Simultaneously, information reaching CENTCOM from sensitive collection assets indicated that strikes were impacting the perimeter zone around the Bushehr nuclear power plant in Bushehr province. The Iranian deputy provincial governor confirmed it to state media, describing strikes against a military base within the facility's outer security ring. The strategic significance was impossible to overstate. The United States had just placed kinetic effects within the security cordon of an active nuclear power reactor, not inside the reactor itself, but inside the zone where any miscalculation carries the word catastrophic. The Strait of Hormuz, meanwhile, had effectively shut down. Lloyd's List Intelligence reported that no large commercial vessel had publicly broadcast AIS positioning data in the southern lane since July 7th. Shipping insurance premiums for Gulf transits had spiked to wartime levels. The price of Brent crude was surging toward levels not seen since 2008. Every day, the strait remained functionally closed. The economic pressure on global markets intensified, which was, of course, precisely what Tehran had calculated. But the Iranians had made a fatal miscalculation in their strategic model. They had assumed that the economic pain of a disrupted Strait of Hormuz would constrain American escalation options. They believed that U.S. allies in Europe and Asia, dependent on Gulf energy flows, would pressure Washington to accept Iran's corridor regime rather than prolong the confrontation. What they did not fully account for was the existence of the prepositioned, pre-authorized strike packages that CENTCOM had spent months developing under the cover of routine exercises. The American response did not require political deliberation. It required only authorization, and once authorized, it executed at machine speed. At 0446 hours on July 10th, the third round of U.S. strikes was executed. This wave was different in character from the first two, where the initial strikes had focused on degrading Iran's coastal anti-ship capabilities, and the second wave had punished the ballistic missile units. This third package was designed to collapse the IRGC Aerospace Force's integrated air defense network across southern Iran. EA-18G Growler electronic attack aircraft from the Roosevelt's Air Wing, equipped with the next-generation jammer mid-band pods, preceded the strike package, activating full-spectrum barrage jamming that blinded Iranian radar operators across a 200-kilometer front. Without radar data, Iranian air defense operators were flying blind. Tomahawk missiles, fired in choreographed time-on-target sequences, hit air defense coordination nodes, communications relay stations, and hardened missile storage bunkers across Hormozgan, Bushehr, and Fars provinces. And then, in the hours after CENTCOM's official statements concluded, something deeply unusual happened. Additional explosions were reported across Iranian territory. No government claimed them. CENTCOM made no statement. Iran issued no formal attribution. Associated Press reported the unclaimed strikes and noted what it described as the distinct possibility of Gulf state involvement, a development that would represent the most significant widening of the conflict's direct participants since the war began. The silence from all parties was deafening. In the intelligence community, that silence has a technical term: plausible deniability. For the Gulf monarchies who have watched Iran threaten their oil infrastructure for decades, the temptation to act under American air cover cover with American targeting data without American fingerprints is precisely the kind of strategic opportunity that does not come twice. In Ankara, Trump told reporters that the MOU was, quote, over, while simultaneously stating that peace talks could continue and that a return to full-scale war was not his goal. His foreign minister described the situation as fluid. His national security staff described it as managed escalation. Neither description fully captured what was happening on the ground, in the water, and at 40,000 feet over the Persian Gulf, where the machinery of American military power had been running continuously for 72 hours with the precision and lethality that no adversary in the world could currently match or replicate. The human cost on all sides remains deliberately obscured. Iran's state media acknowledged one civilian killed in Bushehr province. Independent human rights monitors place estimates far higher. American casualty figures from Azraq are classified. The 3 Fateh missiles that found their target remind the world that precision missile defense is extraordinarily effective, but not perfect. And in the gap between extraordinary and perfect, soldiers die. The Qatari government, which has served as the critical back-channel between Washington and Tehran throughout this conflict, dispatched senior mediators to Tehran within hours of the third American strike wave. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, in parallel phone calls with his Pakistani, European, and regional counterparts, condemned the strikes as violations of the ceasefire terms while simultaneously signaling that Iran remained open to continued technical talks. The dual-track posture, missile launches, and diplomatic outreach, simultaneous and not contradictory, reveals the fundamental character of Iran's strategic culture. Violence and negotiation are not opposites. They are instruments of the same pressure campaign. Vice President Vance confirmed that U.S. and Iranian officials had held technical talks in Doha based on the 14-point MOU framework, addressing the Strait of Hormuz access question directly. He stated that the United States would not return to military action unless necessary. A formulation that, given what had just occurred, was either deeply reassuring or deeply inadequate, depending on where you stood. Here is what the next 72 hours will determine. Iran's supreme leadership is now operating without the physical presence of Ayatollah Khamenei, whose body was flown to Najaf for funeral rites as the strikes continued. The new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, whose consolidation of power remains incomplete and whose legitimacy within the IRGC remains contested, faces the most consequential decision of his tenure: absorb the punishment, return to the table, and accept some version of the American terms. An open strait without IRGC transit fees and a pathway for enriched uranium surrender, or escalate to a threshold where the United States must choose between strategic retreat and a full regional war that would reshape the Middle East for a generation. The United States, for its part, has now demonstrated something that matters enormously in deterrence theory. It has demonstrated will. 3 strike waves in 72 hours against an adversary that retaliated with ballistic missiles at American troops, executed without hesitation and without congressional authorization debate, signal to every watching adversary in Beijing, in Pyongyang, in Moscow that the American appetite for kinetic action, properly provoked, remains intact and formidable. The Strait of Hormuz is not a choke point that any nation can weaponize without consequence. That lesson has now been written in fire across the southern coast of Iran. But here is the uncomfortable truth that no press conference will state plainly. The ceasefire MOU that cost months of painstaking Qatari mediation, that brought the first genuine pause to a conflict that has killed thousands of people, now exists in name only. The conditions that created it, exhaustion, economic pain, back-channel pressure, have not disappeared. But the mutual trust that any agreement requires has been shredded by the IRGC attack boats in the Strait and the American cruise missiles in Bandar Abbas. Rebuilding that trust in an environment where Iran's new leadership is unproven and American political patience is measured in news cycles will require something that neither side has yet demonstrated: the strategic discipline to step back from the edge even while the other side is still standing on it. The Strait of Hormuz carries 20% of the world's seaborne oil through a corridor 12 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. 12 kilometers between the economic stability of the modern world and the chaos of a regional war that no one, not Washington, not Tehran, not Riyadh, not Beijing, fully controls once it begins. That is the geometry of the crisis playing out right now, measured not in miles but in the time between a missile launch and an intercept decision, between a ceasefire and a catastrophe. What would you do if you were in that command center at Al Udeid, watching the flash traffic come in, knowing that the wrong decision in the next 60 seconds ends careers, ends lives, potentially ends a negotiation that took 3 months to build? What is the correct move when every option carries a cost that someone will pay with their life? Leave your answer in the comments. And if this breakdown of the most dangerous week in Middle East military history since 2003 gave you information you couldn't find anywhere else, hit the subscribe button and activate notifications, because the next classified file will cover exactly what those unclaimed strikes mean, who likely launched them, and what it signals about the future of the U.S. Gulf military partnership. This story is not over. It is barely beginning. Stay sharp, stay informed, and never mistake the quiet between the explosions for peace.